all the way into the mid-game, although it inflicts a status that makes very minimal difference around later areas of the game. Pest Threads puts in incredible amounts of damage into larger enemies, and Scarlet Aeonia no longer feels like wasting 3 spell slots on what's basically a glorified gesture. When considering the weakest classes of each, some easy decisions can also be made for the sorcery library, mainly the subtypes of magic that only have 2 available spells for you to use, and in that regard the Clayman sorceries come to mind almost immediately. The Great Oracular Bubble has a very slow velocity that allows you to stack it up with other spells on unaware enemies, but outside of that niche benefit, the utility of the Clayman sorceries aren't nearly going to be as ever-present as spells in the Carian or Gravity subtypes. The Death sorceries could also use a lot of work, if I'm being honest. The 2 main damage sorceries of this subtype are both multi-projectile, making it very hard to pierce through flat defenses of enemies in the beginning of the game, which wouldn't be such a problem if Rancor Call wasn't found in Stormveil Castle, the game's very first legacy dungeon, while the actual performance of the spell won't even slightly stand out amongst others until you're well into the game. Additionally, I don't think I need to even weigh in on the problems encircling Fia's Mist at the moment. Nothing short of a full overhaul is going to save this waste of pixels. I don't know how I would even begin, just fix it. It needs fixed. The 2 Fingers incantations are intended to be an accessible beginner's library of magic that even sorcery builders shouldn't have a problem meeting the requirements of, and on that merit alone, some credit is certainly due, but most of its utility spells offer very little that you can't get somewhere else, and when people begin criticizing incantations for having a bloated selection where some spells exist entirely just to make the library look bigger, this is the subtype they're usually thinking about, especially when some improved variants of the listed spells like Flame Cleanse Me can be found decently early into the game, whereas bestial incantations almost seem to suffer from the exact opposite problem. Sure, it might be worth collecting 2 Deathroot just so you can have access to Bestial Sling, but it has nowhere near the stopping power it used to. Both Beastclaw incantations have been mediocre for as long as I can remember, and the only one that stands out as a consistent all-rounder seems to be Stone of Gurranq, which is awarded to you after finding 6 Deathroot, but that's really what most have come to expect with incantations. Even if a particular subtype offers very little in terms of performance or utility, there's usually 1 or 2 that can still pull some weight.
Eve, genieß was kommt.
Now that I've formally introduced both branches of the magic system, we can move on to the strengths and weaknesses of each as a whole. I'm anticipating this to be the longest section by far because of how stringent you can really get with the details. Starting with sorcery, the first benefit you'll notice pretty much immediately upon starting a new game is that the 2 sorcery starting classes are set up noticeably better than the 2 faith classes. A standard healing incantation is far from the strongest choice, just because 32 FP is a pretty enormous order for someone who's literally at the start of the game. Glintstone Pebble and Magic Glintblade, on the other hand, not only do sustainable damage in the beginning, but end up becoming 2 of the strongest workhorses well into the mid-game and debatably even further on. Glintstone Pebble benefits from being increasingly FP efficient the further into the game, while still being able to deal damage that isn't much compared to its upgraded variants, but still not exactly insignificant. And Magic Glintblade has the invaluable utility of being able to be delayed further by charging it, allowing it to be stacked with other spells in the process. Catch Flame does get pretty substantially powerful the more you go forward, and the Prophet does start out with 16 Faith, making this an ideal start for dedicated builds of that type. But the point is mostly that being your only choice, whereas both the Sorcerer Alliance starting classes have pretty fleshed out kits from the get-go. Another notable strength of sorcery builds is that they tend to lend themselves much more to melee combat. Out of the total 70 sorceries, there are 26 sorceries that either are better suited for closer ranges, pull enemies towards you, or are just outright melee-centered spells, comparing this to the 23 incantations that I counted. These are rough estimates, of course, since someone's individual playstyle could always make a case for 1 or 2 spells I'm not thinking of, but with gravity spells that pull enemies towards you, the 2 Digger spells, and pretty much the entire Carian library, I think sorceries tend to stand out as the stronger performers when it comes to close quarters. Not to mention, some of the same sorceries climb absurdly high in damage the more you invest into them. I know I don't have to make a a case for Kari and Slicer, but the damage on Shatter Earth is definitely nothing to scoff at either. You've also got access to some of the most reputable heavy hitters in the market, like Night Comet, Meteorite of Estelle, and Shard Spiral. You can pick up some powerful Frostbite spells once you start digging into the mid-game, and the 2 Briar spells also means you aren't completely helpless when it comes to inflicting bleed. Though I think the benefit most people constantly underappreciate is just how strong the Astrologer's class's starting staff actually is. I'm not going to bore anyone with math since school started back for most of you like a month ago, and there's already plenty of great videos out there that measure catalysts against each other in a mathematical way. But the Astrologer staff has an astounding 230 in scaling once you hit 40 intelligence, which shockingly ends up being much stronger than most other mid-game catalysts, rivaled only by the Demi-Human Queen staff and the Academy Glintstone staff, both of which are within very comfortable reach at the beginning of the game. And if that isn't enough, then you've also got the Meteorite staff that isn't located too far into Caelid, which might be the single strongest starter staff in the entire game. The obvious benefit to incantations is simply that there's more of them. This ultimately means a more versatile build, more spells within reach of your character at the start of the game, and the freedom to really hammer out a spell loadout that's more appropriate for any specific encounter. Despite only having an expanse of 12 different subtypes, not including Placiduous Axe's Ruin for some stupid reason, each class feels quite a bit more equipped than other sorcery subtypes. You won't find any family of incantations struggling to come up with 2 unique spells. Even the smallest incantation classes usually clock in at 4, which still isn't great, but it's a massive step up from 2, just because it allows space for support magic alongside 1 or 2 reliable damage options. Incantations also allow players an extra line of protection against many instances where your sudden in-game squishiness might be a bit too much to deal with. Having Flame Protect Me stashed away in some dungeon hidden in the mountaintops seems arbitrary and meaningless until you remember that there are 3 fire-aligned brick shithouses waiting to give you a nice shakedown towards the end game. These kinds of support incantations aren't uncommon, but their value only continues to increase as bosses get more nuanced along the late game and no longer tie themselves to a single type of damage. A huge benefit that sorceries almost entirely seem to miss out on. If we're speaking strictly about the fun factor between the two, I think most can readily admit that incantations are certainly stronger in a creative sense. There's never been a single Souls game where I can just pull out an ethereal dragon head and start using it as a weapon, and there probably won't be another game that gives you abilities like that in a long time, just because of how outrageously over the top it is. But that very frequently seems to be the point of incantations. Part of why people find them so fun as opposed to sorceries is because the absence of a staff allows you as a player to feel more involved in the combat. You're not swinging a wooden stick that makes the spell happen, you're making it happen yourself. It's one less layer of separation between you and the spell. And I know other people agree with this because one of the most popular mods on Nexus right now allows you to cast sorceries from your own hand. Now, it's very easy to say that inflicting status is a strength that's shared among sorceries and incantations both, particularly given that Frostbite and Blood Loss are 2 extremely powerful status ailments both inside and outside of offline play. However, I still don't consider this a strength of sorceries because saying this by itself doesn't necessarily take into account that leveling Arcane increases the amount of status buildup you inflict, except when it comes to Frostbite for some reason. This leaves you with only 2 reliable sorceries that having Arcane as a secondary focus will actually benefit, which are the 2 Thorn sorceries. And they just so happen to be boosted by a staff that scales exclusively with Faith and not Arcane. What in the fucking shit? Who made this? Who made this staff? This is a very weird way to bottleneck the performance of status on sorcery builds, and I've never understood why these decisions were made. Incantations give you access to various poison builds with the Servants of Rot incantations, Madness with the Frenzy Flame subtype, and Blood Magic, all of which pull some very enticing advantages from the Arcane stat. This also facilitates the existence of the Dragon Communion Seal, which not only scales with Faith and Arcane very comfortably, but also ends up being objectively the one for some stupid reason. Each class feels quite a bit more equipped than other sorcery subtypes. You won't find any in-game squishiness might be a bit too much to deal with. Having Flame Protect Me stashed away in some dungeon hidden in the mountaintops seems arbitrary and meaningless until you remember that there are 3 fire-aligned bricks on top, a bit too much to deal with. Against 2 reliable damage, step up from 2, just because it allows space for support magic alongside 1 or 2 reliable damage options. Incantations also allow players an extra line of protection against many instances where your sudden in-game squishiness might be a bit too much to deal with. Having Flame Protect Me stashed stashed away in some dungeon hidden in the mountaintops seems arbitrary and meaningless until you remember that there are 3 fire-aligned brick shithouses waiting to give you a nice shakedown towards the endgame. These kinds of support incantations aren't uncommon, but their value only continues to increase as bosses get more nuanced along the late game and no longer tie themselves to a single type of damage. A huge benefit that sorceries almost entirely seem to miss out on. If we're speaking strictly about the fun factor between the two, I think most can readily admit that incantations are certainly stronger in a creative sense. There's never been a single Souls game where I can just pull out an ethereal dragon head and start using it as a weapon, and there probably won't be another game that gives you abilities like that in a long time, just because of how outrageously over the top it is. But that very frequently seems to be the point of incantations. Part of why people find them so fun as opposed to sorceries is because the absence of a staff allows you as a player to feel more involved in the combat. You're not swinging a wooden stick that makes the spell happen, you're making it happen yourself. It's one less layer of separation between you and the spell. And I know other people agree with this because one of the most popular mods on Nexus right now allows you to cast sorceries from your own hand. Now, it's very easy to say that inflicting status is a strength that's shared among sorceries and incantations both, particularly given that Frostbite and Blood Loss are 2 extremely powerful status ailments both inside and outside of offline play. However, I still don't consider this a strength of sorceries because saying this by itself doesn't necessarily take into account that leveling Arcane increases the amount of status buildup you inflict, except when it comes to Frostbite for some reason. This leaves you with only 2 reliable sorceries that having Arcane as a secondary focus will actually benefit, which are the 2 Thorn sorceries. And they just so happen to be boosted by a staff that scales exclusively with Faith and not Arcane. What in the fucking shit? Who made this? Who made this staff? This is a very weird way to bottleneck the performance of status on sorcery builds, and I've never understood why these decisions were made. Incantations give you access to various poison builds with the Servants of Rot incantations, Madness with the Frenzy Flame subtype, and Blood Magic, all of which pull some very enticing advantages from the Arcane staff. This also facilitates the existence of the Dragon Communion Seal, which not only scales with Faith and Arcane very comfortably, but also ends up being objectively the most powerful incantation catalyst on a new game run. But most of these benefits, I think, misrepresent incantation builds as too complicated, which can drive people away from getting too invested in what you can do. A secondary focus in Arcane is obviously far from necessary. It's not often the linchpin of a good incantation build, it just kinda helps every now and then. In reality, you're probably gonna have a much easier time leveling yourself for incantations than you would sorceries, simply because of the stat requirements for sacred seals are much friendlier on average. The highest any seal is ever gonna ask of you is 40 faith, whereas sorcery builds are being whacked over the head by staves that demand your intelligence be stacked into the 50s before you've even cleared Raya Lucaria. Even when considering individual spells, sorcery still loses on this front, because the highest stat requirement for any incantation so far is 50 faith. You have in-game spells like Placidus Axe's Ruin and Scarlet Aeonia that both fall into the mid-30s, while Black Blade and Death Lightning have a slightly higher requirement of 46 and 47, which is a solid 20 points below what's normally required for end-game sorceries. Casting a Full Moon sorcery with a worthwhile end-game staff like Regal Scepter not only requires around 70-80 intelligence to actually be good, but also demands a massive FP investment on top of it. There's a total of 6 sorceries that climb above 50 intelligence as a minimum, and 5 of 18 staves that all require a minimum of 48, being the 2 Crystal Staves, Regal Scepter, and the 2 Grandmaster Staves. This provides a wonderful segue into what I personally believe to be one of the most glaring deficiencies in sorcery builds as a whole. They just ask too fucking much from you. Incantations will admittedly throw you a curveball every now and then, placing Frozen Lightning Spear and Flame of the Fell God in the second Legacy dungeon and then asking you 30 to 40 faith, so it's not like either branch of magic isn't guilty of this sort of thing. But sorcery just takes it way too far at way too many points. Giving someone a staff with an asking price of 60 intelligence as a reward for beating the second legacy boss in the game is only guaranteeing that it's going to be ignored for 3 months until someone on the internet eventually gets curious and decides to build around it, only to then figure out how good it actually is and tell everyone. And of course it is. It better be for 60 fucking intelligence, Jesus Christ. It does make sense in terms of world building that most of the better staves are located in Liurnia, but from a gameplay standpoint it only feels like being roadblocked, further enforcing newer players who may not know of the payoffs to stick with a mid-game alternative like the Academy staff. staff. This only makes the somewhat unengaging playstyle of sorceries stand out even further. Extending on what I said about incantations, a lot of players tend to have more fun with a faith-based magic build simply because there's something about the lack of needing to channel power through a wooden rod that makes you feel more connected to what you're doing. It's not too rare an occurrence to see multiple sorceries tied to the same one or two animations. The Glint Blade spells all use the same animation, the basic Pebble family of sorceries all use the same one, which isn't necessarily a complaint. Dragon Communion incantations have the exact same animation, just with a different colored dragon depending on what you're casting. It's a detail that makes sense, but if you were to take away the casting sigil that determines the family of sorcery you're using, a lot of staff animations start looking very similar to each other. Of course, you still have the full moon sorceries and the Kari and sword sorceries that literally turn your staff into an ethereal weapon, but standard spells like Discus of Light and Flame Sling, for instance, look fundamentally different from each other in a way that can't be visually represented as clearly when all your magic is being channeled through some type of instrument. So that's it, right? Incantations are hands down the better choice. They have more variety, more flexibility across different builds. You don't have to worry about the steep requirements in the mid to late game, and they make for a much more interesting playthrough on average due to having more dynamic animation. This is a lame transit. This sucks. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. Look at how much time there is left in this video. Why do YouTubers like doing this transition so much? Who the fuck cares? Moving on. It's no debating that incantations easily have the upper hand in flexibility and sheer quantity of spells you can pin on your character. But an excess in variety usually yields a lack of purpose, which brings us to what I think is the most obvious weakness of incantation magic. If you were to actually look down the list of support magic, for instance, it would only take a few seconds before realizing that a lot of them are fundamentally the exact same spell, only with a slightly higher efficiency and FP cost than the one listed before it, leading to the idea that there's almost always a better version available if you just take the time to look around. When it comes to status effects, for example, incantations can very commonly overlap in what status they cure, making some significantly weaker than what they would be otherwise, and in worst cases, just flat out obsolete. Alleviating poison, sleep, and blood loss in one fell swoop is almost never going to be used to its maximum efficiency, because there isn't a single environment in the whole game outside of PvP where you're in danger of being afflicted with all three at the same time. Cure Poison offers very little because there's an incantation accessible immediately from the beginning of the game that cures both poison and rot while only demanding 12 faith, and most healing incantations primarily just come down to how much FP you're willing to trade, since they're functionally the exact same otherwise. There is also a notable shortage of sacred seals, especially when compared to the amount of staves in the game. Some would make the argument that it's a simpler approach to a magic system that otherwise feels too convoluted, but 9 sacred seals compared to the 18 staves you're given feels very uneven. Most catalysts will end up boosting a specific subtype of magic if you're a sorcerer, and we're talking damage improvements of around 20 to 30% on average, so very far from insignificant. The only subtypes of sorceries that aren't boosted by a staff are the Clayman, Cold, and Primeval sorceries. Regular Glintstone magic and some Karian sorceries like Loretta's Greatbow aren't boosted by any catalyst, but there are some offshoot subtypes found in larger magic families such as the Digger and Glint Blade sorceries that do get boosted. Incantations, on the other hand, suffer a great deal more. Erdtree, Rot Servants, and Blood incantations all go without significant boosts from a sacred seal. And this may not sound like a huge difference, but keep in mind the largest sorcery subtype that's left without a boost contains only 5 spells. The Erdtree family by itself contains 13, and it's home to some of the hardest hitting incantations in the game like Black Blade and Wrath of Gold, indicative of an incredible opportunity to include a seal that boosts Erdtree incantations only to come up short. The 2 Grandmaster staves don't boost primeval sorceries, but they do come with their own interesting benefits such as extremely high scaling for 50% more FP, or quicker base casting for 20% more. Do you have any idea how massive a perk like that would be for certain incantations? As powerful as the Dragon Communion spells are, spooling one up feels like trying to start a half-dead Subaru. For seconds at a time, you're just holding a button down, hoping nothing comes up behind you and kicks the shit out of you. On that note, the damage on some incantations can easily rival that of the game's top-tier sorceries, which is important to note considering sorceries are a bit more known for their ability to just dump thousands of points of damage into a given area in a couple seconds. And given what I've learned about the game and its inner workings since its release, having Catch Flame on a starting class is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It is such an insanely good starter incantation that ends up performing over most others even at an end-game level, but you better get used to it because it's extremely inconvenient inconvenient coming across any other reliable damage incantations unless you really go off the beaten path, giving incantations a bit of a reputation for being hard to set up, at least not until you've passed the first 2 legacy dungeons. I already talked about how sorcery starter classes tend to set the player up in a way that's much more equipped for damage, but you also have a merchant not even 5 minutes away from the first grace that sells you Crystal Barrage and Scholar's Armament, 2 of the most underrated damage sorceries I can think of, and the item needed to unlock Glintblade Phalanx and Carian Slicer is literally like a few pixels across the map. Even the Conspectus Scroll isn't exactly hard to get to if you're considering Raya Lucaria as part of the main journey, so you can potentially have Comet Shard, Carian Slicer, and a Phalanx spell.
Now I'm gonna say it's a God run and then fuck up.
Any prayer books you find at the beginning of the game only come up disappointing, as you slowly realize nothing will ever be able to outpace the damage of Catch Flame. The Dragon Cult prayer book can be found near Liurnia's Artist Shack, and it can be looted from a random Dragon Cult knight just pacing back and forth on a grass field for no reason, so I kinda just ignored
I feel really
the first
powerful
3
now.
playthroughs
Like the
without
dagger
ever
is
considering he might
insane.
actually drop something worth having.
Yes, give me more coffee.
Für die Schwarznasenschaf immer zur besten Matze. Und Eis zu einzigartigen Bier. Echtes Handwerk, innovative Brauverfahren, feinste Aromen. Entdeck Walliser Braukunst. Wallisan, das Bier mit dem Schaf.
Okay, so moving on to the next section. I'm not expecting this part of the video to be that stringent compared
Now it's
to
a
the
Clay
more
Doom
common
Strider and then
subjective
death.
uses for the best
Okay, it's
spell
not.
builds. But to builds that are primarily interested in casting, this might be an interesting topic. Spell chaining. Firstly, Magic Glintblade and other Glintblade spells are practically built to combo with other sorceries. Charging Magic Glintblade can add a good 1.5 seconds to its delay, and you can then predict when it's going to fire and take advantage of it by synchronizing it with another high damage spell in your loadout. You can do this to a lesser effect with slower moving spells like Great Oracular Bubble, Riker's Rancor, and the 2 Death Rancor sorceries. Obviously, there's the combo potential with the 2 Briar spells, as I think most people are aware of by now. But you can also string together sorceries in a more unconventional way. The delay on Roiling Magma, for instance, gives you just enough time to pull stray enemies into its blast radius using the gravity spells. The Full Moon sorceries also have a bit of combo potential with its slower than average speed, but exceedingly high track.
Another
If you're
yellow?
starting to detect a theme here, then yes,
Holy
you are
shit,
very
man.
observant. Being mindful of projectile speed and stacking spells in a way that they all hit their mark at relatively the same time is the gist of combining sorceries. Spell chaining isn't as straightforward with incantations, but once you notice certain things about how certain spells operate, you can actually find more comfortable chains than you normally would on sorceries. Discus of Light is a fairly straightforward example since it's able to hit its targets twice after a delay, and you can then anticipate the return of the disc by stacking another incantation on top of its impact. You also have spells with notably quick recovery times that are meant to be cast repeatedly, such as Catch Flame, Bestial Swing, and Blood Flame Talons. Even Noble Presence and Lightning Spear aren't terrible options as far as recovery goes, but they're more often saved at the end of whatever your spell chain is. The reason these tend to work better than most others is because they're able to be cast in succession, and therefore you can very quickly swap back and forth between them mid-combat. Although this is usually how you'll be chaining incantations together for the most part, there are also some slower moving spells like Flame of the Fell God, Whirl of Flame, and I guess Elven Stars if you're into that shit. But if you're searching for something a bit more advanced, you can take advantage of blood incantations like Swarm of Flies or Blood Boon. Bleed procs can force a stagger on most regular sized enemies, so if you know a certain chain of spells that can proc bleed on pretty much anything, you can follow it up with another high damage incantation while enemies are recuperating. We've covered just about everything in terms of what to expect from either type of magic, but combing through every single benefit of each is an unreasonably tall order for someone who's currently in the middle of brainstorming ideas for his next magic overhaul. However, what I can do is dedicate the final part of this video to the more underappreciated positives of each, such as
There's
the fact
no
that
scrapper,
magma
huh?
spells give sorcery builds easy
I really
access
wanna
to
get
fire
another
damage,
Hopeful
or how
Feather.
certain Dragon Communion spells give Faith users a means of dealing magic damage. This sort of multifaceted approach to magic has been a very welcome change of pace, and the days where sorcery and faith builds were each locked into certain elements of damage is mostly a thing of the past. Sorceries have been trying their best out there to break free of the stigma that they might as well be playing a point-and-click adventure game. Whether or not it's actually making significant strides in doing so is still up for debate, but at least they're trying. As a result, we have utilities like Eternal Darkness, Carian Retaliation, and Thops's Barrier. Eternal Darkness is honestly very hit and miss on the best of days, but Thops's Barrier somehow wound up in an incredible incredibly strong position simply because it's a consistent hard counter against bosses who like to projectile spam like Elden Beast. And there's a surprising amount of larger projectiles you can block with Carian Retaliation, such as the Glintstone missiles from Magic Dragons and Deathblade projectiles from Black Knife Assassins. Something that almost never gets brought up in the whole elemental damage debate is how certain elements carry their weight into multiplayer, and although it's still true that fire damage remains the most applicable, lightning resistance being lower by default on player characters is a detail that's commonly looked over, making Dragon Cult incantations incredibly useful in their own niche, even if the seal they're boosted by could be described as dumpster adjacent. Additionally, people commonly seek out beginner Godslayer incantations like Black Flame and Black Flame Blade, only needing 20 and 17 faith respectively, to challenge themselves on low-level runs while still being able to take advantage of a DOT effect that scales off of maximum HP. And of course, you have access to holy damage, which yes, is kind of wet, greasy garbage in the middle of July, but it has its benefits for clearing out certain dungeons because of the damage it does to skeletons and deathbirds. And revenants. Try healing when you're next to a revenant. Yeah, you thought the fire resetting frostbite tip was getting old? You're lucky I'm not saying this shit for the next 15 videos. I don't think you need a 30+ minute video to tell you that there's no real answer to this question. At least not one that's worth searching for. Sure, you can measure the two against each other, factoring in every possible facet of the experience you could possibly think of, from build variety to accessibility all the way down to how cool the animations look, but if there was an objectively measured answer that decisively favored one over the other, it would just be a boring question to ask. Both can optimally perform under the right conditions, and whereas I personally tend to lean towards incantation magic, that's obviously just a personal preference. And declaring that either is better in any matter-of-fact way is honestly only going to feed a cycle of provocation. Sorceries tend to excel in single target damage, crowd controlling, and area denial in ways that incantations struggle to keep up with, but lack any meaningful versatility that allows sorcery builds to be self-sustaining. Incantations arguably have a bit too much versatility to the point where some spells feel very functionally repetitive, but commanding such a width of elemental damage and status effects makes you more likely to be prepared for a larger array of circumstances. Incantations are when you feel like picking apart enemy defenses with class and grandeur, and sorceries are for when something just really needs to fucking die. Neither solution is really incorrect, even if one of them might be somewhat indicative of sociopathy.
Those fake ads really drive you mad, huh? The game looks so fun in the ads, but when you
Shut up, man.
What is up, everybody? In this video, we're going to be beating Elden Ring along with all of its Great Rune bosses without leveling up any stat other than Endurance. We are also going to be doing this run region locked, so coming swinging.
The anchor.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you got the generator. It has a Omamura, it has a fin. Dude, I thought his build was simple.
One Jotun?
Yeah, all right. We have a Doppler, we have two. But with these, it feels.
I'm gonna be fine. I know what to do. Now, if I can't beat it with the new strategy, I will play the new character. But I figured it out what to do. Copium? It's not copium. I'm gonna get armor right now. Trust me, guys, trust me. Not getting ice armor at the beginning is not as good, but, you know, it is what it is, right? I'm gonna try and aim these myself. I hate aiming myself, but unfortunately at the beginning, like, I've got to give myself every advantage I can. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to go, I'm just gonna run through it. Because, like, the problem, bro, like, the problem is the fact that, like, I'm in the thing. So, like, what if I'm not in the thing? Because I just walk away. Like, who gives a fuck? So, if I can get the ice thing, then I don't need to worry about it at all. You see what I'm saying? So, I feel like I'm in a very good situation here. Let's go with Vortex Hook. Yeah, this is actually really good because I just need more buffs. Okay. It's down at the bottom. There it is. There it is. Okay. I really wanted to go with that projectiles, but this wasn't the right option at the time. This is massive. Holy shit. Bro, this could be my game. This is my game, bro. This is my game. This is my game. I win 100%. 100%.
So many equipment drones and not a single equipment on the map.
Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Okay, it's fine. This is good. This is good. Okay, there's 2 more down here. Okay, where's the other one? Got it. We're gonna get long range. I think we need long range. Yeah, we need damage. I feel like if I'm taking enough damage to where survivability is an issue, I've already lost. We're gonna do... I think we're gonna do Ice Blast armor. I probably should have gone with 3. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I should have too. Okay, after this is the hard part. And I'm hitting those on purpose, by the way. All bad, garbage. We're gonna go move speed. Okay, let's get this first. All right. I've got a massive shield, it doesn't matter if I take damage. Health regen, we're gonna obviously get this. Killing all these. Bro, who said I gotta play by the rules? Fuck them. We're just not gonna go over them. It's not even a problem. Did I kill his ass? No, I didn't kill his ass. Wait, I think I killed his ass. I killed his ass. All right, let's go back around. Okay, good. All right, next, let's get this again. Yeah, we'll get this. Run. Okay, this is fine. Got his ass. There it is. Big money. We'll get ability haste. I want to go back and get all this. We're gonna do projectiles. And now we'll do, do we need to do damage? Do we need to do damage? One? Yeah, let's go for it. I didn't mean to do that. I think I might win.
Bonne journée avec Dulcolax.
Good morning. Good workout stealing the show with those flawless moves.
Dulcolax agit localement contre la constipation et vous soulage en une minute. Rendez votre journée encore meilleure avec Dulcolax. Ceci est un médicament autorisé. Demandez conseil à votre spécialiste et lisez la notice d'emballage.
Just gonna go damage her. Okay, let's go up here. Pick this up. One down. Well, that's really good for me. Okay. Man, there sure are a lot of mobs here. Got it. There's a cat. Can we do ability haste? Oh. Oh, man, bro, we out of control now. Let's go. I didn't even realize I hit that. Let's get this. I have to hit this. I have to beat this. Okay, go down. I can't get hit by another one. Okay, I can do it. I'm dead. I got lucky. I have to invest. Nope. Nope, not happening. Very, very, very disappointing. Super bad that happened. That's super, super, super bad. It's not the end, but it might be the beginning of the end. We'll see what happens. We'll go with this. Okay. Okay, we got two cocksuckers over here. Damn, man, these things are really fast. I gotta go to this. have to do that fucking trial, man. Let's go to the trial right now. The faster I get through that, the better off I'm gonna be. Also, if I move far enough away, they'll probably de-aggro. Yeah, they're de-aggroing. We're fine. Okay, we have to push this really fast. Whatever it is. Fuck. I can beat it. Got it. Easiest game of my fucking life. I really want to go for another buff, but I just couldn't do it. I can get up to this guy though. Fuck. Fuck, I got the cocksuckers on me again. Jesus Christ, how's he not dead? Got one. Nice. Bro, this is getting bad.
Nice.
This is perfect. This is exactly what I needed. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think I cleared the map.
Okay, we gotta get this next guy.
Asmongold is too loud and my game is too silent. Holy shit.
Okay, this is huge.
Fuck is going on? I watch this later, man. This makes too much noise.
Probier's Cornetto Glacé. Unwiderstehliche Cremigkeit in einer knusprigen Gurke. Macht euch glücklich. Lusso.
Le réseau saute avec une couverture exceptionnelle de 99,9%.
UCLA med students learn obesity equals good.
If you're wondering what the future doctors of America are required to learn as first-year med students at UCLA, this piece on medical fat phobia was just assigned as required reading. No health, no care. The big fat loophole in the Hippocratic Oath tells these students that
Medical fat phobia isn't the result of workers not knowing some special cheat codes, providers not knowing some cheat codes for working with fat patients. Providers didn't all miss the day of medical school where students were taught how not to be cruel to fat people. Fat phobia is medicine's status quo.
phobia is the status quo in American medicine and is something that we need to defeat.
I wonder
Before
why.
you all ask, because I know you're going to. This is the person who wrote the article, a fat liberationist PhD candidate at an Ivy League public health school. Medical fat phobia, in her words, refers to the specific ways that hatred and denigration of fatness manifests within medicine. Even though you might think you're a brilliant med student, everything you know about obesity and fatness is wrong. Because, as
What does this person say? I gotta read the rest of this. Everything you know about obesity, about fatness, about fat phobia, about fat people has been and is still wrong.
Sure.
That's crazy. You want to know why it's always young women that are talking about this, about how being fat is good? It's because when they get older, they die.
Because, as is logical common sense, for a race to have been constructed, the slave had to exist, and had to exist as the antithesis of health, so that European physicians, anthropologists, and other eugenicists could determine what set the slave apart from the Caucasian. So
The slaves weren't fat.
Sweet strawberries?
This whole idea that fat people
Smells of sweet
is
strawberries?
the dumbest fucking thing I've ever
I
heard.
never
And it's
got
the
this
biggest
message.
lie First world Americans
What
and
does that mean?
Westerners tell themselves to justify being a fat piece of shit. No. If you go to India and you look at the poor people in India, none of them are fat. You go to Africa, you look at the poor people in Africa, none of them are fat. You go to China and you see the poor people in China, none of them are fat. They're real poor. Yeah, this is NA logic. NA logic is when you think that fat people, you have to be rich to be thin. It's crazy. It's clown logic. It's amazing that like anybody actually believes this. Well, I tell you why they believe it. It's because it rationalizes their bad decisions in life. That's the reason why. The most obese part of the population is actually the poor. That's because the poor people are the least educated and the worst at making decisions. Guess what? You take 100 rich people and you take 100 poor people. Which group is going to have a higher ratio of people that make good decisions? It's the rich people. Fucking obviously. Everybody knows this. I know it's not a comfortable fact, but it's still
Is this
a
a
fact.
gulp
You're
only
not really poor here.
message?
It's not. That's not like really being poor. Being poor in America is like being middle class in a lot of countries, and it's even about being upper class in a lot of countries.
Okay, they
The
don't stop
idea
coming.
that
I
you
already
are
have
poor because you can only afford
38,000.
McDonald's is something
38,000.
only a fat person would think of. I'm sorry. This is a complete fucking illusion. It's not true. And everybody knows it. What's this here? Fast food has trash nutrition and trash food is cheaper than good food. Poor countries, villages mainly eat bread and butter, barely anything else. I'll take. Well, why don't they eat bread and butter then? I guarantee you, you can make better food and you can make healthy food if you're broke. Also, here's another example. You go look at a prison. They don't have a bunch of fucking fast food and shit. They don't have anything. And most of them are skinny too. Now, there's some fat asses in there too, but not so many. So this is what's funny to me, right? Is that you can have a situation where in every real life observable, genuine situation where people are actually poor, none of them, hardly any of them, are actually fat. But people in the West here, in first world countries,
have convinced themselves that being fat is because you're poor. It's the most delusional, brain-dead, dumb fuck, self-serving, victimizing bullshit. And everybody knows it's fake. You want to lose weight? Why don't we ship them over to fucking Africa? Go ahead. Go over to Africa. Go over to, you know, a poor place in India. Go live there.
Credit card.
Lose weight or not. How about that? I'm good, bro? Yeah, right? Because it's not really true. Yeah, is that your experience and opinions? Bro, you getting mad? We got a fatty in chat getting mad. Is that it? You getting mad? You crying about what I'm saying? You crying? How many donuts you eat today? What are you talking about? You got 3 donuts already? What you getting mad for? 0? None? Well, that makes sense then. He's mad. He hasn't had his donuts yet. So he's mouthing off in chat. That's what's going on. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Do you think fast food culture has something to do with it? Fast food culture, you mean what a person's actions are? Yeah, what a person's actions are do have something to do with it. To deny a system is in place to promote unhealthy foods is asinine? To promote unhealthy foods. Oh, so there's a, oh, well, it's getting promoted. No, it's not. Anybody growing up knows that they know what good food is, they know what bad food is. You go to the shittiest fucking high school, the shittiest middle school in the country, and they're gonna say this to you. Like, it's a fucking common sense. Everybody, it is general knowledge. It's total bullshit. Complete bullshit, guys. Let's finish it.
So the origin story of anti-fatness is really rooted in black, fat, queer, trans abolition. This reality, in her view, has created a
Somebody paid her to do this.
where we immediately jump to identify poor eating, exercise habits, mental illness, and citing mortality of obesity, all in the name of obesity prevention. If obesity isn't bad, why prevent it? Besides, she reminds us that it is proven that weight loss is a useless, hopeless endeavor.
True. You can't do anything to stop it. See, the thinnest she can be is 325 pounds. The body just won't let her lose more weight than that.
Scientifically proven. So it's actually discriminatory when doctors tell you you need to lose weight for your own. The future doctors of America.
That's incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. Why are Americans so dumb? The reason why Americans have this problem is because they have to make everything, Americans have no problem changing reality to fit their bad behavior. That's the reason why. That's what's really going on here. Is that they're willing to make up this shit, and the problem also is that nobody wants to call this out, because I guarantee you she's probably the kind of person that if you call this out, she's gonna call you racist. And so people don't want to go and call this shit out because they're afraid. They're afraid of being called out and put on blast for something they didn't do and they didn't say. So, big fucking surprise, this is what happens. Instead of defunding the police, we should defund public schools? No, it's not. The problem is not about funding. The schools teach kids what is good and bad food. Like, if you take 100 people and you ask them honestly,
my build is perfect for group clearing. Holy shit.
Pizza. Every single one of them is going to say salad. This idea that people aren't taught what's healthy and what's not is insane. Of course they are. It's common knowledge everywhere in our culture. That's like knowing left and right. This idea that some people don't...
Well, most of women have a problem with left and right.
It's inherent to some extent. It is. It's inherent. It's obvious. And so it's always other people's fault. No. The thing is that I've known a lot of fat people in my life, and I've never known a single fat person who was fat and it wasn't their fault. That's right. Every single time. And these people try, and here's the funny thing about it, is that these people are going to kill themselves and kill other people in the process. But you're not going to look like this when you're 80 because you're going to be dead before then. That's the truth. You can't do this. What are we even talking about here? Being fat is a choice. Yeah, you can't look like it. You're gonna die. I wonder how many of these fat people like this that are trying to promote this have to die until people wake the fuck up and realize that it's a bad idea. I don't know. Like, it's crazy. It's like natural selection. They're picking themselves. It's nuts, man. Being fat doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, I know. I myself am considered obese. Well, I mean, that's fine. I don't have a problem with somebody that has like that's overweight. Like, I don't have a problem with someone that's fat. I just don't want to hear about how it's good and it's not your fault. Like, you can be fat. Be fat all you want. Go ahead, be fat. But do not even for a fucking second try to go and tell me that it's healthy or that it's not your fault. That's it. I have no problem. If you want to be a hog, go ahead, be a hog. But don't go and expect me to try to fucking play along with it. That's it. That's bullshit. That's what really makes me mad. I hate that shit, man. Maybe they'd rather die young than give up their favorite foods. That's fine, but that's an easy choice, right? I mean, you want to do that? Go ahead. It's your life. But the difference is, like, you do this and, you know, just don't go telling everybody else it's a good idea. It's unhealthy and it's the individual's fault, but there's more to it than just that. Yeah, there is more to it, but, like, not really, though, right? Not really. Like, anybody that's got problems with this, again, everybody who I know, like, more intimately, and I know what their lifestyle is, there's an obvious reason why they're overweight. It's because they're not controlling themselves. That's what it is. And so, yeah, people like talking about that shit, and it's nuts, man. What's up, favorite less than others? Yeah, sugar addiction? I guess so. Zach has a perfect life and wouldn't understand anything about mental health. What's this here? Well, I'll read this real quick. We're going to get into it. What's going on with this? How many donuts? How many donuts has it been today? How many? I want you to be honest with everybody, okay? Just tell me. Tell me how many donuts. Just be honest. Like, is it 7? You probably haven't gotten enough, and so you're mad. The whole box. That's probably so he's mad because he's out. Guys said there are other problems. You said nah. There are other circumstances that affect people mentally. Come out in all ways. Some are fat. Some are skinny. Some hoard trash. Mental health issues come out all types of ways. Not all fat people have mental issues, but some do. Okay. I mean, I get. Hey, boys. I guess they're going to die. That's just the way it is, eh? Right? I mean, because if they've got a mental problem, they can't get over it. They're fat. They're going to die. That's life.
Neue AP ProBook 450. Hat ja Milchstandard 810 zertifiziert. Ja. Will ja widerstandsfähig sein gegen extreme Temperaturen, Staub und...
Danke fürs Onboarding. Jetzt zu der Strategie. Anna?
Ja. Und wer testet? Hersteller selber natürlich. Ja. Hersteller selber. Ja.
Played a video game in the last year, you've probably seen something like this. Vampires in Redfall floating aimlessly in the sky. Starfield.
We just watched the first minute, but we just go through it again. It's
characters.
Because I can actually see it.
And Hogwarts Legacy wizards falling through the ground into nothingness.
I think another reason why this shit happens too, by the way, is the fact that video games have so many more variables. Like, there's way more things that can go wrong.
While I can admit glitches and bugs can be hilarious, they've also left me wondering, is this the new standard? Then, just this January, one of my favorite series, Deus Ex,
the Embracer
Group, franchise that arguably transformed gaming when it was released in 2000, got canceled out of nowhere. And Deus Ex is not alone. In the last year, unprecedented numbers of games have been canceled, workers laid off, and studios shuttered. The teams that make Saints Row, Red Faction, and Deus Ex have all lost their jobs.
Y'all remember Red Faction? I played Red Faction 2. That game was so cool.
Even studios that make huge games like Tomb Raider and Borderlands are being hit downsizing. Now, you're probably thinking, Alec, there's a very simple reason for all of this. the economy is rough, video game sales are down, and tons of industries are laying people off. Do these companies have any other option besides tightening their belts or shutting down?
Well, the reality is that the video game industry doesn't have anything to do with making a bad game. For example, Capcom is hiring more people, and I bet From Software is probably doing the same thing. I bet Nintendo isn't experiencing this in the same level that other people are. So the reality is that the reason why these companies are failing is because the games aren't selling at the ratio that the companies predicted them to. That's the reason.
To find out for myself, because things just weren't adding up. I mean, in 2023, American consumers spent $57 billion on video games alone.
Yeah, but like, how much of that?
So I started digging, and I discovered it was not the result of a tough economy. In fact, that's just a helpful cover story for what's really going on.
What's really going on?
To understand the present grim reality of the video game industry, we have to go back to the start of the pandemic.
COVID.
2020 was a
That's the guy that invented COVID.
As people were locked inside their homes, game sales skyrocketed.
Yeah.
They skyrocketed so much, in fact, that investors started eyeing the industry as their next great cash cow.
2021 is where you see the massive investment when you look at a chart.
I need to build a
2020,
make a cigarette.
2019,
But where's my
2021. It's wild.
I do think this is definitely true. I think this would have happened on its own, but he's definitely right that the pandemic was like an accelerator for like large fund investment into video games.
Franchises?
But I think that what's funny about this is that we're already seeing the recession of that now.
Layoffs or closures I mentioned a bit ago, one thing ties them together. A huge video game conglomerate called Embracer Group. Emboldened by this once-in-a-lifetime market, Embracer Group bought up studio,
The flame of ambition.
including many I've already mentioned, makers of Borderlands, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex. They even bought the company that owns the board game Settlers of Catan.
Ooh, that's the new expansion of PoE.
Actually, I want to play Borderlands 2 again.
Kind of excited.
Borderlands 2 was such a great game, man. I love
Reception. That's Alex, a former mission designer at Embracer-owned Volition Games, which made Saints Row. Embracer.
Yeah, but Saints Row was bad. People didn't play it. So like, what is the process? Like, what do you think's gonna happen? Like, you make a game that's bad, people don't like the game, then like, how do you expect to keep your job? Like, if you go and you're a cook and you are like, somebody orders a steak and you say, all right, you want a steak? Here's a tomato. You're gonna be done. Like, they're gonna be like, bro, like, this is like, we need another cook. Like, we need somebody in here that can make steaks. This guy just keeps giving everybody tomatoes.
Wasn't the only studio with this business plan. Microsoft merged with Activision in 2022 and has been on its own consolidation push.
The biggest companies with the most sustainability and diversified revenue streams are buying up as much of the industry as they possibly can, seemingly in order to buy up talent and to buy up IP. So
I think that there is a greater goal with this, but actually, let me let him finish.
That they can spin that off into as many profitable ventures as possible.
I think that this exists on a meta level as well. So I don't think that the only level that it exists on is sales of video games. I think that it also exists inside of the scope of being able to control the production and distribution of the games. So, for example, Steam obviously is a huge competitor for any other individual studio trying to make their own launcher. And very few studios have been able to make their own launcher and have it be successful in like a big way. Obviously, I think that the biggest success case is, you know, like Battle.net, right, with Blizzard. But then you also have the Riot launcher, and then you have Ubisoft. Like, they're all making their own launchers. And the more games that are on that launcher, the more that launcher can act as a market replacement to Steam. So being able to control the launcher allows them to avoid the 30% payment fee that Steam requires. And it also gives them other abilities that they can advertise without any restrictions from Steam. They can do whatever they want with it, and they can control the space completely. So that's another big component that gets people to want to consolidate IPs and put all of them together, because it creates a higher value proposition for a user going into buying Game Pass if they know that they can get Diablo 4, and they can also download Battle.net, and it has all these other games in it that's like filled to the brim with advertisements, right? That's the reason why it's happening. So like this exists in terms of the scope of the games, but it exists on something that's above that. It's the distribution of the games. And having enough games allows you to control to a degree where that distribution comes from.
A game developer who did not work for Embracer, but has a unique claim to fame.
I was laid off twice in 1 year.
Another great example, not too bad. Another great example is HoYoverse. Somebody brought this up. MiHoYo just recently made their own launcher. So now you get Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, Honkai Impact 3rd, and Zenless Zone Zero all on the same launcher. Why is that? So they don't have to pay Steam.
The big thing about game companies is when they become bigger, there is a certain amount of growth that those shareholders are expecting.
And to achieve that growth, game companies
People look at the number, usually the number for a lot of people is 8%.
do a few things. They'll buy up studios to achieve a greater market share.
Yes.
They'll rush games that have no business being released
True.
at the expense of inhumane working hours for their staff.
Yeah.
They'll cram in as many microtransactions as possible or chase whatever new monetization strategy competitors do.
Yep.
The video game industry consolidation is leading.
And this is also another problem, is that a lot of high-end leadership is that, like, moving a company in a direction, you are still accountable to shareholders collectively that are not as informed as you are. So when a video game company isn't making a lot of money and their shareholders are not happy, it's very difficult to communicate how battle passes could be negative in the long term for the brand, because a shareholder doesn't have any long-term investment into a brand. From a shareholder perspective, they're just going to buy this stock, and then when the stock goes down, when it starts going down, they're going to sell the stock. So what happens for them is that they don't really care about the long-term effects of what these business decisions are, because by that time they're on to the next fucking thing that they're invested in. And here's what makes it even worse, is that a lot of the executives are the same thing. They have quarterly earnings reports, and they're min-maxing quarterly earnings reports where they get big payouts, and then as soon as they do enough of those, then they leave the company after they end on a high note, and then they let the ship sink after that. So you have a situation where there's like no sense of long-term accountability for the direction of a business. And that causes people to make a lot of very, very rash and very consumer unfriendly, in a lot of cases, decisions. And I think that's what's happening a lot here too.
To less risk. You're going to see less games that do new things, that are engaging with new ideas.
And I think that if you want to talk about games, oh yeah, games are so bad. Oh my god. Like, it's like, unless you are like one of probably 10 directors in the world, the amount of movies that you can probably get greenlit now went from this in like, I don't know, 1998, and now it's like this. It's like, okay, so do you want to make a superhero movie, or do you want to make a movie about cars? Oh my god. Like, that's it. That's the only thing you can do. And so unless you're Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, or, you know, Guillermo del Toro, there's no way you're going to get this much funding. And I bet even those guys have trouble getting funding.
Yes.
These gaming conglomerates are taking a page from Hollywood by milking established franchises.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Beholden shareholders, not enough to make a game that makes some money and pays its workers and leadership a decent wage. Shareholders expect constant growth. In other words,
yes,
unsustainable return on investment.
Well, constant growth is guaranteed, assuming that the market stays the same because of inflation. Right? Like, naturally that would be the case. But the problem is that the growth, like, if you're at 15%, people want you to go to 20. If you're at 20, they want you to go to 25. There is never enough.
Start unraveling for Embracer.
Everybody wants to invest in NVIDIA.
Honestly, we didn't hear about the $2 billion deal until it fell through.
Embracer is a publicly traded company, but one particular investment partner helped continue their industry consolidation.
Yeah. Embracer Group had a $1 billion investment from Savvy Games Group.
Savvy Games Group, for the record, is a giant in the gaming space. They bought huge stakes in EA, Take-Two Interactive, and spent over $4 billion alone to buy a mobile game company called Scope. They're also
Yeah, I mean, I even thought about doing this myself, right? Like, I was thinking, like, maybe in, like, 20 years, 10 years or something like that, I could do investment capital for games. Because, like, I don't know a lot about it, right? But I know enough about it to know that it's, like, I think it actually, like, there's a lot of potential there. There's a tremendous amount of potential there. And I think that obviously, like, what the fuck do I know, right? I've taken, I don't know, 5 finance classes in college. Like, there's guys that they have a master's in it, and they've been working in the field for 20 years. So, like, think about the way that they're seeing it, right? And so they are getting super, super heavy into video games. Like, you're seeing, like billion-dollar funds that are being put into gaming now, even now.
arm of the public investment. The wealth fund.
Oh, there he is. Yep.
Arabia's royal family. Savvy's $1 billion investment in Embracer happened in June of 2022. And shortly after, Embracer spent $395 million on the rights to Lord of the Rings and bought another round of studios
That's incredible.
looking to grow their portfolio for their investors.
Savvy Games Group committed to investing over $2 billion in there, and that fell through.
Up until late last night, we had an amazing cash flow. I think that's history now, so it's not that relevant.
For undisclosed reasons, the deal with Savvy Games closed, and Embracer's shopping spree was suddenly looking like a huge mistake.
But hey, this is business, and I know shareholders and other stakeholders expect me to win every battle. It was a big one. And we did.
Well, you know, it's like, I love the... What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
To win this one, but I'm sure we will win many of the future battles.
For sure.
And that's where Embracer went bad.
We got like an email at like 9:05 or something for an 11 o'clock all hands meeting. The people from Gearbox, thankfully, just ripped off the Band-Aid. We're like, yep, we're closing the studio. One of the guys who make Think worked there since Volition opened was like, well, that's 30 years down the drain. It's hard to watch the thing you've been a part of for, you know, probably a majority of his life, just get destroyed through no fault of his own.
People who have been laid off from Embracer and elsewhere are devastated. They're seeing their industry crumble in a way that they haven't seen before.
Well, the reason why you're seeing this happen also is because the truth is that the video game industry grew unsustainably during COVID. And I think that the tech industry in general grew unsustainably. So when you compound the retraction of people going back outside and not as many people being online. Now, if you look at the graph, COVID was a huge spike, but whenever it balanced back out, it didn't go back to where it was before. We are still at a much higher degree of people playing games, people being online. Like, I think that it was huge, and it has been, right? It's been huge, but it obviously went down. And so a lot of these companies scaled unsustainably, whether this is Meta, Twitter, Polygon. I think that even they did layoffs, right? Maybe it was just Kotaku. Everything inside of the ecosystem scaled unsustainably. And also think about influencers, right? And also content organizations. Like, think about like 100 Thieves, FaZe, a lot of these really big TSM, a lot of these really big esports teams also scaled unsustainably, and they had to drop like tons of people, like triple digits in some cases, numbers of people. So this is what's happened in a lot of cases, right? And I think that for video games, that's also a very big component for it. And a big reason, I want to say the biggest reason, is because the games that these people are producing are not of a high enough quality to justify the investment. I would argue it is investors not knowing the market instead of focusing on making better games as well as a service.
Hell yeah.
They thought they could just print money. Well, it's because they do print money. So let me explain, this is a very rudimentary, and I'm probably oversimplifying, but let me just do my best. Take 100 shots, you miss 99. You hit one, the one pays for the other 99, and then you write the 99 off as a business loss. clever use of game mechanics.
Last year, there were a little bit over 10,000 layoffs in the video game industry. 5,000.
And people bringing up Trump, this actually is what Trump did. Trump lost it. That's why he didn't pay any taxes. He didn't pay any taxes because of something called a carryover loss.
Those were through Embracer Group, which is significant.
In a similar move, Microsoft ended up laying off 1,900 Activision and Xbox employees.
It's really, really hard for the people that have been laid off to find new jobs.
I also think that Twitter firing a bunch of people and maintaining its functionality, a lot of people might shit on Elon Musk personally and publicly, but I bet there's probably a lot of CEOs and guys in leadership positions that saw that happen, and they were like, write that down. Yeah.
They're in this pool now that, if we're counting last year, 20,000 people were laid off in total from last year to right now in a year and a half. People are unable to pay rent. They live in cities that they relocated to for these jobs, cities that are very, very expensive. They have families.
That's a very good point. Yeah, people that get relocated and then they lose their job, that's horrible.
The medical conditions.
Yeah, it sucks.
They're losing their health care.
During the height of the pandemic, people like me, we use social distancing as an excuse to 100% Pokemon Snap or perfect our Animal Crossing Island.
Yeah, I'm still doing that.
A few friends to pick up a game for the first time in years. Of course that would last. I still have not completed Pokemon Snap, and my Steam library is overflowing with games I don't have time to play anymore.
Yeah.
Any executive who actually understands business knew this was a bubble and could see this happening. And I think,
well, I think that also a lot of these people, they know that it's a bubble and they don't care. So like if you look at it from an executive perspective, you hire on 1,000 people that you're not going to need, and then whenever you don't need them, you just fire them all. Easy. Done, right? So if you look at it from the way they see it, it makes perfect sense. So it only seems like a bad thing because you're not looking at it with the priorities that they are.
in the most generous reading possible, receded more than they thought it would. But I don't think a single person who ramped up a ton of hiring during the pandemic thought that they wouldn't have to lay off a single person.
Great point. He brings up a really great, totally, absolutely.
Neu, brutal Couture, umarmt das Leben.
Neues Bier, aber es Besseres.
Whether you're angry at off workers, canceled games, or prematurely released games, Lars Wingefors, CEO of Embracer, laid out the logic behind it all.
Our overruling principle.
And I also want to say too, one of the other big reasons why this happens is because there is a lot more awareness and visibility on bad games now. Like there were a lot of games that were brought out in the year 2002 that were garbage, but people weren't really talking about them and making video essays about how bad they are. But now you have so much more focus and attention that's being put on these bad games, especially whenever they're made by a big company, that one bad game sounds like 10 bad games.
To always maximize shareholder value in any given situation.
All right, go back.
Is to always maximize shareholder.
Laid out the logic behind it all.
This is the guy.
Our overruling principle is to always maximize shareholder value in any given situation.
I think,
and that's the problem, is that any given situation is contemporary, right? It's contemporary language where you're thinking about things in the direct relation they have to what you are doing at this exact moment. But if you think about it in the long term, doing something could be an investment, but it's hard to communicate that idea to a shareholder group that's unhappy with their quarterly reports. So that's the problem, is that you have a situation where it's literally the blind leading the blind, but neither of them are really blind, but it's in their best interest to be. Like the executives probably know what's going on to an extent, but they don't care. And the shareholders probably know what's going on to an extent, but they don't care either. It's literally what's happening.
The goal of maximizing quarterly profits is really the death of any artistic industry, and that view on
I shouldn't have picked up the bongos.
maximize profit is the
I could have grabbed them.
Yeah.
One thing that kept coming up as I spoke to journalists and game developers is the question.
Well, this will always be the case. People will always want to make more money. This will always happen. And you do see some companies that are investing long term. Like, this is my opinion. I
Holy
think
shit.
Microsoft's value has the potential
Three?
to 5x in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe
I have
15 years.
3 clovers.
Because
I never had so
Microsoft
many.
has set up such an infrastructure and foundation that if they can nail any sort of cloud gaming,
I have
where it's
90%
actually accessible
crit
by a lot of
chance
people, and
with 3
nail other
lenses.
forms of like cloud computing, and make it accessible to an average person, it's going to completely change everything, right? It will 5x, no shot. I would be surprised it wasn't more, to be honest with you. Microsoft couldn't do that with Google. Microsoft could do what Google Stadia didn't. Yeah, exactly. Because we all know that in 100 years, we will probably all be cloud gaming, right? Like, I would pretty much, I would assume that. 100 years, we're cloud gaming. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think that they have the most infrastructure to take the fullest advantage of it. And gaming's only one component, too,
The
by the
industry
way.
has, for years, been laying off workers once a game is completed. But
Yeah,
some
of
of the
course.
most revered games, Elden Ring, Tears of the Kingdom, are made by studios that hang on to its workers, game after game, sequel after sequel. I'd argue, it shows.
In my first layoff, now you've got 80 people who lost 40 people who now need to fill in all of those gaps among themselves and can't hire to fill those slots.
And you also have the component, like, this is something that's really big that people don't really talk about a lot because it's much more subjective, is what it does to morale. How it affects morale when you're losing, like, everybody, like, there's like a rapture that happens in your company, and you lose 3 out of your 4 friends at the company. It destroys morale.
So
and then the
you're
people
either
that are
going to
left,
need to make a
you're
smaller
stupid
budget
if you're not trying to apply somewhere else.
or severely cut
Right?
scope. And even then, you might not have all the tools that you had previously because now you've got giant knowledge gaps amongst your team.
With this recent round of layoffs being so severe, the problem won't just be that an experienced worker is gone from a specific studio. They might leave the industry altogether.
Yeah.
Imagine how many more buggy
The day
launches.
before, oh god. Yeah, no, this is very true. I've heard that a lot of guys that, especially if they work in like the space of like not just gaming as in like programming the way like a zombie works, but if they work in the network design of gaming or like administration of gaming, that jobs that are in the same sector for other companies pay way higher.
Because failed promises are going to start popping up in games in 2 years when half the experienced people are gone.
Oh, nice, 100
Even
Pro.
when I was in college, people told me that the average time for people to spend in games was 5 years, and then people either burn out or find something different that doesn't crush them.
Jesus.
And so now, what impetus?
Yeah, crunch is really bad. Crunch is like it's like one of those euphemisms that people use for something that's bad. Well, crunch is whenever you have to work 90 hours a week. And then there's another one, sprint. Isn't that cute? It's a sprint.
People have to stay when it was
All hands, yeah.
Now it's just even riskier.
Because of consolidation and mass layoffs, gamers are going to see a decline in good, quality games. Maybe pressed to find the little amount of investment that is out there, big studios will save money by crunching more projects, making more people work inhumane hours, and rushing more games that will inevitably get knocked mercilessly on the internet.
Yeah.
There is one check on this mad dash to key shareholders. Unions. In March, Sega of American employees were the first group of video game workers.
Oh, this video is already a little bit outdated. The Sega did make their own union, but recently all of the Blizzard employees for the World of Warcraft team have unionized. And it seems like a lot of the people at Microsoft are trying to unionize as well. This just happened, I think, 1 or 2 days ago. So, then this video is from a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, it's already started to happen. And you're seeing these companies, and by the way, I don't think it will really matter. And the other reason why they're trying to unionize, apparently, this is what they said, is that they don't want to lose their job to some form of AI or something like that. And I think that a lot of people are worried about that. It's happening? No, it is. It is definitely happening. I personally think that it won't matter, and I don't think the unions will make that big of a difference. They will just stop a problem from happening quite as quickly.
Major American company to win a union contract. They negotiated not just pay raises, but layoff protections. Workers at ZeniMax, makers of Fallout and Elder Scrolls series, unionized in 2023. While they're still at the bargaining table, they've already won.
Yeah, but that's the unionize. I feel like it's a lot of different groups inside of the Microsoft umbrella that have tried to unionize.
Over the use of AI.
The unions aren't going
Let me
to
go back just like
Makers of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series unionized in 2023. And while they're still at the bargaining table, they've already won concessions over the use of AI.
The unions aren't going to stop the layoffs tomorrow.
No, they won't.
But on an individual, like studio level, unions have helped people keep their jobs.
Unionizing would
The problem is that unions can be bad. And a lot of people bring up good points that unions can be problematic in a number of different ways. But the issue is that right now, I think that if you think of it as a pendulum, I think the pendulum is way too far in the control of the companies and the leadership of the companies, and it's too asymmetrical. And I do think that you need unions to bring that back closer to the middle.
Absolutely make for better games. For starters, right now, individuals have very little power, and whether or not you are actually replaceable, you're going to be seen as replaceable. To an executive, a game designer is a game designer. The amount of specialization involved between disciplines of design is not something that is understood at the corporate level. And in general, happier people, or at least people who are cared for and fulfilled
They work harder.
basic needs, are going to be more effective.
They have that in Pal World. So like I learned this from Pal World.
Slavery.
Is that if you have the pals that are sad, they don't work as fast. So you want to build them hot tubs, and that way they'll work at night.
Their job, and a union is something that can absolutely help get people the basic dignity that they deserve in the workplace.
As for myself, probably never see the resolution. Cliffhanger from Last Day Sex. Purely.
I think that somebody will do it. It's just that the Embracer group feels like they can't make any money off of it, and they could be right.
Am I
Also,
busted?
I feel like this is what happened.
Am I
Like,
boosted?
Saints Row came out, and it was a complete fucking failure. They look at where Deus Ex was at the time, and they think to themselves, let's not carry this to term. Let's just get an abortion. Like, that's probably what fucking happened. And I bet that if you had the same information that the leadership for that company had, I bet it probably would make more sense than it does to the public. Because if I think about it from their perspective, I totally get that. I can easily see how that would happen.
Because some executive didn't like the way it looked on a spreadsheet, he fired everyone working.
No.
And when it comes to workers like Colin and Alex,
And also, I think that there is a degree where a lot of these people that work in game development, in the same way that people that work in these executive positions and in these finance
68%
positions are telling
chance.
the game
Holy
developers
shit.
how they should make video games.
Holy shit,
And
man.
sometimes they're wrong. And in a lot of
Holy
cases
shit.
they're wrong. I think that there are also instances where
I
there's
want an
game developers
ADG.
getting
I have
together
3
and telling
clovers.
people
I
in
really want an
finance
ADG.
what they should be doing, but they're wrong too.
Can you imagine the amount of rockets
what
I will fire?
just want to make good games. In Colin's, he's now working on indie games to do
Good for him.
I think if we are focused on making sustainable teams and making interesting art, the players will find it themselves. And if we are creating niches to be filled, then the niches will be filled.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a great point.
I would love to keep reporting on the video game industry, but I need your help. If you have any experience in the video game industry and have a story to tell, send us a line at stories@perfectunion.us. It's stories@perfectunion.us. I'd love to read them. Thanks for watching.
What a great video. And I agree with pretty much everything he said in the video. I do think that if you had access to
I
the back
take a
end
piss.
and what the projections were, then I feel like a lot of these things would make more sense. And also, by the way, how do people make projections? So what they do is they have to bring in a donkey, and then they put a dartboard on the side of the donkey, and then they blindfold the secretary, and they have her throw darts at the dartboard. And they just put those numbers on the projections, and that's how they decide how much money they're going to make. So yeah, it's not necessarily a fucking science here. However, with a lot of the cases, I think that it makes sense that they were going to shut down these games. Because it's very easy for us to say, oh wow, it's so sad that they shut down this game. We didn't see the game. None of us saw the game. These guys saw the fucking game. So with something like Saints Row comes out, it's fucking awful. They see this game and they see, oh, I think people are going to say the same thing about this game. Let's fucking cancel it. And by the way, big companies do this too. Blizzard did this with StarCraft Ghost, and they also did it recently with the unannounced survival game that they decided to destroy. And then you also have Riot, who was making an MMO, and they recently, like Mark Merrill, who's the CEO of Riot, came out, or president, I'm not sure which one, came out and he was like, we're starting over.
Whoa!
They basically canned the project. They canned it, and they said that basically they recycled it. They said everything that we're doing, it's not working, let's try it again. They basically canceled and started a new game. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's huge. So big companies have the freedom to do that because they have all these other games that exist in the ecosystem that can afford to prop up a loss, right? Which is one of the good things about being in a big company and having diversified assets. It's the same thing as having a stock portfolio or anything else. You want to diversify assets in basically anything that you do other than probably finding your girlfriend. So, and even that is debatable. So the point that I'm making here is that with a lot of these people that are trying to make money in the video game industry, some of them I don't think are as stupid as we think we are, as they are. And I think that if we had access to the same information that they did, we would see their point of view. We would. So yeah, Half-Life was restarted from scratch in 97 too. Also, another big thing is that these huge studios, I don't think that they're sustainable. I don't. There's the video. Give it a like. This is a great video. I really liked it a lot. They're not sustainable because of their size. They make so much, they cost so much money, and there's so much bloat to the studio. How is it that a small studio, like for example, comparatively, Grinding Gear Games, can deliver a product like Path of Exile, but Diablo can't do the same thing with 10x the budget and 10x the staff? So at a certain point, the 1-to-1 ratio of money spent to money received begins to fall apart. And the
is this
reason why
Spinal
money
Tonic?
gets spent is because all of the money being spent is perceived as a 3x multiplier.
Yes,
so
it
it's
is.
like, if you want to invest money into something that's going to give you 3 times back your money, would you rather put $1,000 or $10,000 into it? Well, I'd rather put $10,000, so I'd get $30,000. Obviously, right? So they're trying to put more and more money into it, thinking that they're just going to basically throw money at this problem and it will solve the problem. Well, it clearly doesn't, right? Clearly does not do that. In addition, China banned all American Gambit skins for life games. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that's why I think it's happening. Private equity is only one component to it. And I think that also a lot of companies have been owned by private equity for quite a while, but COVID did speed it up, and I think it definitely normalized it. I think here's another reason why private equity is getting a lot bigger and more popular for games. Straight up real reason. I know some of the guys that do this.
Nice.
I know them. They are closer to my age than a boomer, and some of them are around there. It's because the people who are working in these companies now have enough pull, and they have
we're gonna grab the credit card
that they can make decisions.
and grab
in
the
this
Spinal
space
Tonic at the
where
end.
previously the people that they were working for 50 years ago, working there, like, they've been working there 30 years, and now they're like, 65. They don't have that intimate understanding with games. But now you have these firms that are bringing in the new guys, and they do understand it intuitively. They understand it on a deep level because they play and they interact with the games on a daily basis themselves. So now you have a higher degree of competency, so that's why they're able to go after this money. And so that's the reason why. Gen X? Yeah, Gen X and older millennials, absolutely. Yeah. Exactly. Same reason we had the MCU. Yeah, I think that's another big reason, right? Is like, yeah, the guys that grew up on Avengers are now old enough to fund the MCU. How convenient, right? You get new blood with more knowledge? Yeah, exactly. I don't understand why you need a union to fill a niche of these gaming companies. Can't you just encourage small companies to make games? Indie gaming companies, PAX seems like what I'm going for. Why would I want a union in
yeah,
Microsoft
but now it's getting too much.
Well,
come on,
because
man.
you work at Microsoft or
Come on,
Ubisoft.
guys. Chill
If you
with the
don't work
rats.
there, then it wouldn't
Is
be
it because
relevant
of the
to you.
clovers?
Like, why does anybody care about a union at Microsoft if you don't work at Microsoft? So for them, the reason why it's important is because it gives them, it's like do you remember, like, whenever they were breaking up those, like, Free Palestine protests and everybody was locking arms so the police couldn't hit each person? Think about the police, but they're the executives. And they can't fucking pull one person out of the line because everybody else is holding them. And that's the union, right? Is like the idea that you can't remove one person because everybody else is there to create collective bargaining in the best interest of that person. Collective bargaining rights. Yes, collective bargaining is extremely strong. It's job security. Like,
oh, another
job
mountain
security is one
prime.
of the most important things. I think it goes without saying, right? But it definitely is.
Mit Asana befinden sich Aufgaben und Ziele am selben Ort. Dadurch verstehen Teams, wie ihre Arbeit Ziele unterstützt. Und es gibt keine Schwierigkeiten, aktuelle Pläne zu finden. Testen Sie Asana, a smarter way to work.
That's great. That's what I needed, man. Where's the teleporter? Yeah, it's definitely because of the fucking 57 leaf clover. It can't be that I have so many rats. There's no way this is normal. Yeah, well, I guess more lightning. Mithrix is gonna be dead in a second. Holy hell! What the fuck is that build, man? %10 chance, 34. I think that's the most busted build I ever had. That's insane, man. That's just insane. That's so insane, man. Holy shit. Oh,
This
Mr.
right
Beast.
here needs to get roasted. For anyone who does,
Thank you. Yep.
I have no clue
know,
what's
a video
up with
came out
Mr.
somewhat
Beast.
recently from someone who claims to be a former employee of Mr. Beast, and that video contains about 53 minutes of content. Too long, didn't watch, that's totally fine, because I did my own summary breakdown, which I'll link down below in the description, with legal examples and a full description about the more meaningful claims. Again, links down below. But since all that happened, another member of the Mr. Beast team has come out with a statement, and that statement is absolute, irrefutable garbage that fails to address literally any of the important issues whatsoever, in yet another example of how to irreversibly screw up your own public reputation with a speedrun edition. Just to clarify, this is yet again not a video about Ava Chris Tyson. That's a whole separate problem. There's a lot of really intense issues coming out with regards to all that, and
Who gives a fuck? Like, Ava Chris Tyson's a fucking freak, talking to kids, obsessed about lollies, fucking weirdo.
Who is Ava
should
Tyson?
probably be in some sort of institution away from society before somebody else gets hurt.
Who is Ava Tyson?
Okay, we're done. True, you know, fucking straitjacket, padded room, move on. It doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast might not have known about this. Who the fuck knows? Right now, I think it is inconclusive. Everyone here agrees with the take? Yeah, but like, what I'm saying is like, this is why I haven't made a million fucking videos about this.
inappropriate behavior and Discord servers, private messages, Jimmy's involved, and the list goes on. But for me, the concept of running illegal lotteries, falsifying game results, and breaking the law is a lot more immediately interesting when it comes to the world's largest YouTuber, who is renowned across the planet for his incredible generosity, despite the fact that every single bit of it appears to be for personal gain, nothing more. Anyway.
I think that a lot of generosity and philanthropy, there are a lot of people that do conspicuous
Nice,
philanthropy.
another
I don't think that
60%
conspicuous
extra
philanthropy is a
damage.
problem, but I do think that it's a
what's
problem when it's
inflamed?
done as a way to cover up an image.
I have like
or as a way
everything you
to
could dream
make
of.
something bad seem not as bad. I think that donating
I have
money to things
everything.
that are charitable for
I've
good
got it
PR
all,
is
man.
Okay, but it becomes bad whenever it's being done
Every
as
single
a way to
item
hide for
synergy,
bad
it's
PR.
here.
That's the
One
way
red
I see it.
item?
It's my
Or
opinion.
white?
A video came out from a former employee who claimed
Isn't there
essentially
more?
3 separate things. First, the game
Maybe
show
there.
videos are manipulated, directly impacting the integrity of the competition.
Yeah.
Second, physical products, namely Feastables chocolate bars, are more akin to lottery tickets than actual merchandise, directly targeting children, which is a pretty severe ethical quagmire. And third, during his t-shirt signing live stream events, the team is frequently offering illegal lotteries, which are either not paid out properly or otherwise violate a bevy of rules and regulations regarding sweepstakes law. In essence, the methods by which Mr. Beast has risen to...
Which is, by the way, I know that I don't really want to criticize, Mr. Beast for the candy thing, but I do want to say that if I could make it a rule that kids can't buy things that have a random chance in them, I would do that. Straight up. I would do that categorically. I would do that for booster packs for cars. I would do that
Well, I mean,
for
whatever.
transactions and
I have no
loot
other
boxes in video
views
games.
for the scrap.
I would do that for getting special toys inside of, cereal boxes. I would do that for
Oh, damn.
across the board. I think it's bad, and what I think it does is
Nah,
it
whatever.
normalizes gambling. And by the time the kid is an adult, there is already a foundation that's built that normalizes that type of behavior. While I'm not willing to condemn Mr. Beast explicitly, I do think that the practice is problematic, and I think the practice completely is bad. And
Okay, let's see how
things would be
fast we
better if it didn't
can
exist.
kill
Makes sense,
Matrix.
yes. But I don't have any unique anger towards Mr. Beast for this.
Fame and fortune is intrinsically predatory as it leverages child psychology for maximum profit. Pretty intense.
How do I do
allegations.
this?
Adding this in postscript because I just noticed there was 5 hours of one of these
Ah,
live
that's
streams where they
how.
were doing all this stuff that was still up on Facebook, and now, after all of the news of this broke, they went and took that down too.
That's
So-
stupid. They shouldn't have done that. That's like when Doc deleted the post
No.
and said that he was talking to a minor. That's so stupid.
they are running around trying to pull every single clip of footage of the stuff that they did, including this one on Facebook. Yeah, that probably says something. Don't
I'm
you
so
think?
bad at
Well,
skipping,
in my
man.
own video, I discussed a couple of those same examples, like rigging a competition between boys and girls by directly removing one of the more skilled players on the boys' team in order to skew the results blatantly on camera. Before going back to some of the more hard-hitting
I'm so
infractions
fucking bad
here,
at this.
I want to read and discuss a statement made by Chucky, who appears to be a high-level Mr. Beast team member.
It's Chuck E. Cheese.
Who's taken it upon himself to debunk these allegations with one of the worst responses you can possibly imagine. Normally, I just read bullet points or summarize, but for this one,
Which makes sense, because this post reads like it was written by a rat.
Okay.
Like, I'm being real. Like, it's such bullshit, man. Absolutely. I mean, these are legal
Let's see
evidence,
how
right?
fast we
Yeah,
can
but
kill
they're
him.
not being investigated. Now, there is actually something that...
You dead,
if you
dude.
destroy evidence before you are aware that you're being investigated, but you do it preemptively, that is still illegal. But it's different.
I'm going to go point by one by one. Quote, I quickly want to debunk some of the info in this video since the guy who made it was on my team. It was my decision to fire him for erratic behavior. He worked at the company for less than a month and wasn't an employee for most of the videos he mentions to have knowledge on. There's so much in this video, and I want to specifically address him saying our videos are fake or staged, because this is not true. I was on set for many
I didn't
years.
skip last phase.
Okay, alright, cool, man. Let's hear it. Quote, you won't get in a video unless you're
Did I?
friends
I didn't.
with someone that works at Beast. This is
I did!
a statement that can
Nice.
easily be proven wrong. There's probably hundreds or thousands of people who have no affiliation with friends/family and Beast employees. Think the 456 people in Squid Game were ages 1 through 100, etc. Jimmy doesn't more than like a dozen people, LOL. And response? Sure. In the grand scheme of his YouTube channel, Mr. Beast can certainly point to a multitude of examples where people that aren't directly on or affiliated with the production team were part of videos.
Of course. And also, the implication with what was said was that Jimmy invited them personally, which was never what the accusation was.
Can I fight the
So it
Voidling?
was shifted from people were involved with this that were in the company to people who were involved with this know Jimmy personally. You see how that happens?
There were other creators, there's verified instances where a few random fans were chosen for things or won very large sums of money. But here's an example of what that looks like.
Alright. Whoa, sis. I'm sure you don't want a cheaper one? Nah, I'm just about to get $1 million. Deep French,
I don't believe this is real.
It is.
Man, this is crazy.
This is only a small percentage of what you have.
I don't even know how I'm gonna spend it all. This is.
What's the problem with this?
They gave this man...
Wait, let me watch this again.
It looks like creators, there's verified instances where a few random fans were chosen for things or won very
That's
large
fucking
sums of
insane, man.
But here's an example of what that looks like.
Oh, yeah, so he's using this as an example of it actually happening.
The only thing this build could be any stronger is with the ATG. That's the only thing I can boost with.
Yeah, they gave this man 24 hours to spend $1 million. He did, while they crack jokes about how rich he is and all this other stuff. But a few years later, he came out and said this.
He did help me financially, but like giving me money for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. That's why I'm trying to word it differently. But he did give me funds, but I just wish instead of like just, cause it's okay to get funds, but to help me invest, to help me be able to be stable on my own without his money, you know? So that's probably one thing I would do differently.
Like if you invest it, if you invest it,
Mr. Beast. Like, I'm sorry, but like, we're gonna complain about a lot of shit, but this isn't on. Like, this is crazy, bro. Like, he gave you a ton of money. Like, what are we talking about?
Can give you is when
we
had planned out the house and stuff. I literally had an hour. He had somebody come to my house, and we sat down and we planned all this in an hour. Yeah, they came to my house and we planned this out, and in about an hour. So I wish I would have had more time, and I wish I would have did a couple things differently on the
Also,
top.
here's another point of this. I think there's a good chance that this video is clipped in a way that makes it seem like this guy is accusing Mr. Beast of doing something that's problematic, where he's probably just actually posting a retrospective of what I wish I had done differently in that time period. So it's being cut in a way to make it look like Mr. Beast is probably the bad guy. But in fact, this guy is just providing a retrospective of